My name is Lennart Sacredeus. I'm right now a high school teacher and a journalist on different Christian and Christian Democratic papers in Sweden, and also a member of the Church of Sweden National Synod and National Board. But between the years 2006 and 2010, I served in the Swedish National Parliament in the Committee on Taxation. And between 1999 and 2004, I was a member of the European Parliament. And at that time, I was a member primarily on the Committee on International Affairs, Human Rights and Defense. But I also served in the Committee on Social Affairs and Employment. And I was Vice President of the EU Parliament relation to Ukraine, Belarus and Moldova. So I served as an election observer both in Belarus and in Ukraine. I'm 56 in a month, and I am married and have 3 children. And this is the very first time that I have the great opportunity and honor to participate in this leadership forum here in, well, this is the first time also in Poland, but you've run it before in Hungary. Well, the topic is, welcome once again, how Christians and churches can support elected parliamentarians. That is the topic. And the topic could, in one way, be divided into 2 parts. Do we speak about the individual Christian? What you can do as individual without asking your pastor or your denominational leader or whoever about what you do. You follow your conscience and you do what you find is right and wrong from, not what is wrong, but what is right from your faith. But it could also mean on a more collective way, which we have to look on, because we talk about politics, and politics is about a lot of people. And in that sense, we also have to scrutinize and also maybe question, is the individual answer of supporting and giving some sort of feedback to individual elected representatives, politicians, is that good enough? Or do we also need a church perspective, denominational perspective, or if we speak about a larger unit than just a few of us? But first of all, do not underestimate your own importance. What you can do from person to person is important. You can, of course, build a relationship that is there to stay for many years. And that could be the decisive point whether that person, and I speak better and more about an elected representative than a politician, because a politician is a word that has double or even more meanings, and some of these meanings are quite negative. But anyhow, you can be the decisive point whether that person goes in that or in that direction. And when a church is supporting a person, an elected representative, it tends to be more impersonal. So if you can build a relationship, and how do you build that relationship? I think there are 3 levels when we speak both of the individual and of the church or the denomination. And the first is, of course, to defend democracy in itself. And I know, without pointing any fingers here, that we have representatives from at least one country here that I know went through a very hard period during World War II. And in that period, World War II, and some countries were occupied by foreign powers, it was important whether there was a religious and spiritual, and we speak about a church leadership or not, defending liberty, defending human rights, defending the right of the nation to have its own independence. This is very important because the spiritual leadership defending democracy in all its cases is a crucial point to give a moral base for democracy as the best of systems that all in a way are bad. Because democracy is not perfect, will never be perfect, because you and I are not perfect as individuals ourselves. And if you think about a dictatorship in a country being run by you, would you be happy to live in that country? I don't think you even would enjoy being that dictator, because a lot of times I hope and I trust, and I trust it's also about myself. You know all your weaknesses, hopefully your strengths, but it is not a way of leading a country. So democracy and defending national independence and the right of self-government is crucial for churches and spiritual leadership to stand up for. And it was done so in many cases. I have mentioned in an earlier speech that not just, and I was thinking about Norway and Bishop Olav Berggrav in Oslo and other bishops that stood up for the right of free speech and independence and against violence towards the Norwegian population during World War II. I also mentioned yesterday, and I will mention it in this connection, that there was a Danish Lutheran Reverend Kai Munk, who in a very, very small rural congregation on the west side of Jutland, in a part of Denmark that is not very heavily populated, from that pulpit, out there in the countryside, his words from God, was very much noticed down in Berlin and the National Socialist headquarters at that time. And like Friedrich Bonhoeffer, who also played this role in Germany during World War II, both of them were executed at the very end of the war. They paid with their lives, and they also showed that democracy is something to fight for and defend with courage, and not showing, not being a coward, and not being a person or a religious leadership that leans back and say it's something for others to care for. You have to do that yourself. And especially the religious leadership is so important that if they do not go ahead, they do not show leadership. If they are not in the front line, they do not show as shepherds what the layman and what the church or the congregation, a Christian community as a whole should do. And therefore we have to ask something from the leadership, and they have to defend democracy in itself. This is both on the individual side and on the church side. The individual could say that I wait for the church leadership to give me some sort of direction. And I think it's a legitimate requirement, but you cannot say that they didn't do anything and therefore I shouldn't do anything either. But I think it is the church leadership that should set the example from the beginning, not taking away that responsibility from you yourself. If we speak about defending democracy, I also have to relate, mentioning yesterday, about this specific country. Poland is the country where we must say that all started, that took away actually 45 years more or less of communist one-party atheistic dictatorialship in this part of Europe. That used to be called Eastern Europe, and that is Central Europe and Eastern Europe. Here a lot of people, not at least Catholic people, showed courage, and there was a church and a church leadership, specifically the Polish Pope John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, born not far away from here, but also others like the Primate of Poland, Cardinal Wyszynski, and others that showed leadership. And Poland thereby showed other countries and other people in Central and Eastern Europe that we dare, we go ahead. If someone in this room is of Hungarian extraction, of course it is very important what happened in Hungary, and especially in Budapest in 1956. That should not be forgotten. And of course June 17 riot, not riot, but revolt among the East German workers in East Germany is important. That was actually celebrated June 17 for a long time in Germany, in West Germany, not in East Germany, in West Germany, or the Bundesrepublik, the Federal Republic of Germany, as a day for German reunification. That day was removed as a holiday on October 3 when Germany formally was reunited in 1990. I've been speaking about defending democracy, human rights, and that includes, of course, the religious liberties on both church leadership and also on the individual side. We live in a democracy, and we move on to point number 2. Can you adopt an elected representative? And what does it mean with adopting? One way of doing that is to figure, do we go for that person that is the closest when it comes to values? Or do we go for that person that is the closest representative geographically because he or she is the area representative? Then this goes into a matter that also deals with how the electoral system is in your country. If you're from England, from United Kingdom, or you are from United States, you will say that this is my representative, this is my congressman, or this is my MP in the House. Although I didn't vote for him or her, it's still mine in the sense that they represent our area. If we go to Norway, Sweden and other countries which have a proportional representation, which means that smaller parties are represented and not just winner takes it all, as you have with the American and UK system with one-seat constituencies. It is important then to say, well, we have maybe 5, 10 MPs in our district, and then maybe you don't just go for the closest one. Maybe you could go for that person who has a clearer standpoint in questions that you personally feel is important or that your congregation feel is important. Adopting should not mean that you are kind of taking over and say that we have kind of adopted you as an elected representative. Because since I have been that myself, you always appreciate care and love, but I think also it could be presented in a way where you almost think or feel that someone is caring more about you than you could really understand, and that it comes from nowhere. So I think it's a gradual growth where you build trust, saying that we care for you, we care for your office, we care for your service for the people, because an elected representative, a politician, should and must be a servant of the people. That's why we elect people, representatives. But do not say that we have adopted you, we love you, and we are so proud of your work in the parliament, because that person, at least if it's a Swede, would have problems to understand, well, why do you care so much for me? I have never met you before. Well, we have noticed you and we love you so much. And then a lot of times the elected representative would feel like this: you build up too high expectations on me. I'm just a human person. And since you build up these high expectations, my experience is that I can just go down when fulfilling these high expectations. And that is the problem of building up too high expectations. Have the expectations, if I use the term, moderate, modest, realistic. But if you build them up like this from the beginning, it's hard to say that they can improve. Most likely the direction is just downwards. When you come closer to that person, you can say that we would pray for you as a church or me as an individual, because we think that you are important for our community, for our country. It doesn't have to be a national elected person. It could be a regional representative or in your very local community. You don't have to go for the big shots, excuse me my language, but those serving the local community is so important for the well-being where you live and the development of that town or that rural fellowship or community, whatever it is. So care for them as well. And you could say that there are questions that we have noticed from the media or from the websites or whatever that you have been working with or positioned yourself in, and that we think are important and that we care for. And therefore you give support, encouragement in their work to continue in that direction. Thirdly, you could say that we do not just adopt a person. We would like this person to come more publicly to our church, to speak. Or he or she is questioned, not questioned in the sense of interrogated, but you say Q&A in English nowadays. So there are questions, and the elected representative has the opportunity to elaborate a little more than he or she might have the opportunity to do in the papers. And therefore you build a relationship on a more collective base, and the church can also say that we find these questions important. But also the elected representative could feel that when coming to the church, should I give the right answers here so that they applaud me and I get the second visit? Or should I be very, very honest and I will get some reactions in the audience because I speak the same message in the church here as I do in all other whatever meetings. And that is also the temptation of the elected representative, to have a speech and a message adapted to the crowd in front of him or her at that very moment. That is not honesty. And I think that you then should applaud, saying that we do not share that view, but we honor you saying the same message here when it's not applauded as where it is applauded. I think in the long run that is a better representative. I think that when you give space for a person, not just adopting, praying, caring, maybe writing, but you give a public space, then of course the question will be in your church and in your congregation, why should he or she have that space for you? And then I will conclude with one thing, and that is that I should know the number of years ago, but there is something called the Lausanne Declaration. And the Lausanne Declaration deals about a common theological platform for people belonging to the evangelical, and you would say also maybe in general a Protestant side when it comes to the Christian church. And they have felt that we need to write down some basic principles from which we build our cooperation. Of course, we have the creed, or the creeds, because there are many creeds, and they are from the church meetings many times ago, down to Nicaea and Antiochia and so on. But let me say that if you have that common platform in theology, then you can trust one another much easier, in the sense that building conferences, arranging conferences, and having many activities in common. I think that if your church, locally or on a more denominational level for the country as a whole, or even for you as an individual, has some sort of common platform that we worked with at conferences, I shouldn't say a conference like this, but that there will be some sort of development saying that we need some basic, not a party program, not a total political, not covering all the political themes, because they are more or less endless, but having some common ground. I think it's much easier to adopt and engage in the political life and care for the elected representatives and know why we should support specifically he or she, or maybe not that person, because we would like to promote and encourage what we feel goes in the right direction. If we don't have that common platform, it will be a lot of split in the parishes. And I should not use the name of the evil power, but it is a political term, I believe in many countries, that the evil power is in the details when you speak about politics. If you dig into all type of political questions, you will not find one single party, one single representative, that you will not find one single question that you will disagree upon. You will always find one, or even the second, or even the third, and you can split and totally disintegrate a church, a loving and caring church, through politics, and we should support everything. But you can also unite the church and make that church having a larger impact in the local community, and maybe even on a larger geographical scale, if we have that platform as is built up when it comes to the faith and theology, when we speak about the Lausanne platform. Thank you so much.